Hi there guys, and welcome to my video about how to self-service your Honda VFR 800. Now this is the 800X Cross Runner, but it's pretty much exactly the same as the Honda VFR and the VFR X Cross Runner. Yeah, pretty much the same bike, and what we're adjusting today is going to be tightening the rear chain on the bike. And yeah, whether you've got either one of the models, the process is going to be exactly the same. Now, if you've never serviced your bike at all in any way, I wouldn't be too worried because this is incredibly basic, and make sure you watch the full video before you decide to waste money on paying someone to do this for you, because I've had my motorcycle license for around 10 years now, and the first 3 years was a complete nightmare, and I feel very stupid getting ripped off paying $150 for something incredibly basic like this that can take someone even inexperienced less than 10 minutes in total. And once you've done this, if there was a stopwatch, you could probably do this task in under a minute. Okay, so first things first is get an idea on how slack your chain is, so you know if you need to tighten your chain or not to begin with. Bikes vary, each bike varies, but without rambling, I'll just say in short, I reckon that there's not many bikes that have chain slack in them of any more between 1.5 to 2.5 inches at most. There's not many bikes that have more or less than that. How do you tell how much is 1.5 to 2.5 inches? Well, you get down nice and low. Okay, so you just get down nice and low and you find the center point of the chain. So that's the rear, and the front little wheel just there like this for the chain sprockets is there, a little sprocket wheel. So halfway is about here. So just keeping your eyes on that, you lift it up and down and you can see that this is incredibly loose. It wasn't like this when I started. I'm not that bad. I loosened the chain and then re-tightened it and decided to do tightened it back up here and decided to do a YouTube video. So it was loose, but nowhere near this loose. If it's this loose, this is about the point where riding your bike would begin to become dangerous, because from the gravity pushing the chain downwards, it would be possible for that chain to come off and get torn and get caught up in your wheel and cause an accident, make a big mess. Okay, so moving on. So you want your chain tension on this bike, I think, to be 1.5 inches. Once you get past 2.5 inches, it's time you tighten it. And if you want to be a perfectionist, even 2 inches is a bit too much. So how do you measure exactly how much is 1.5 inches? Well, you don't look at like the top of the chain and then lift it up and down and find out how much is 1-2 inches like that. You look at the bottom of the chain and the top of the chain. And when the chain is usually a bit tighter than this, what you do is you lift it up and down quickly, like that, and like all the way up and all the way down, and you can see, because it's all foggy, you can see where the bottom part is reaching and where the top part is reaching. So if I was lifting it up and down like that, and that was full tension, that means the chain would be going from here to about there. See what I mean? That's how you tell how tight the chain is. Okay, moving on. Okay, step 1 is loosening this pin for the rear wheel at the back so that you can rotate it. I won't bother explaining in a great deal, but what you've got here, this part here, the bit of metal with the line in the middle, is like a C shape. It's like biting this rod, pin, whatever you call it, that's holding onto the rear wheel. So when you do up the screw tight, it clamps it and grabs hold of the cylinder in here, the tube, and when you loosen it, the C kind of opens up so that you can turn and adjust this thing. And you can adjust it by these things here. See these little teeth? You put something in there and you tap it or you twist it, and it will turn. If you push here on these things, or that way, it will rotate. And you think, how can something rotating tighten the chain? Well, how it works exactly is here, it's kind of 2 circles. There's a circle here and a circle there. It's not centered, so when you turn this thing here on the back, it moves around in a circle like that, and it tightens and slackens the chain. So you can see at the moment it's very loose. The tool that I'm meant to use, I think, are just called chain adjusters. Looks a bit like this. It's got teeth at the front, and what you do is you hook this bit on one of those gaps inside there, and then it puts pressure on the other side, and you can adjust this thing here like this. But this one's very undersized. It's meant to be a lot bigger than that. This is for a different bike, so you're meant to hook it like that and tap it up and down, but you can see it doesn't hold on very well because it's not the right size. But you don't need to buy one of these. When you've loosened up this nut at the back, turning that thing is incredibly basic. And it should move very easily unless it's your bike's old and it's gone, the grease on it has gone very hard. So I've got my 17mm socket wrench. It's probably the same in the VFR 800 and the 800X Cross Runner. It's probably always the same. If not, just grab a different size. 17mm, chuck it on here and put it on the nut and just tap it until it comes undone. Make it nice and loose so that that adjustment thing turns easily. There we go, so it's loose enough to do my things now. So I'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I was going to buy one of these online for about $15 or $25, maybe 30 tops. But you really don't need it, it's very basic. Okay, so you get anything at all that can get into position on these teeth here, because you've got to turn this thing, you can just tap it in either direction. One way will loosen it and one way will tighten it. Okay, so, you know, if you look very carefully, you can see I've done the tiniest little dot of damage there from using this, because it's chipping away at the metal. But realistically, you only adjust your chain like this about once, twice, maybe 3 times a year if you use your bike a lot and do a lot of kilometers. And even if you do a lot of kilometers, you're going to be able to use a different one of those to adjust it each time. So you'd probably have to do that sort of damage for 20 years to your bike before you would just need to buy that piece again. And it's probably less than $150, and it's just never going to happen. So I'm not going to waste time getting that tool. You can do it with pretty much anything. I'm just going to do it with something like this. The chisel would go right on the corner and the back inside there pretty well. This is rounded. This will probably do a pretty good job. To show you quickly. So even this thing do the job pretty good. Just get in there and tap it. And whack the hammer on the back of it lightly. I've decided to use a little flathead screwdriver that fits on the thickness of that plate, that disc, and just make it a bit more rounded and soft with some tape. Okay, so I just put it there so it's on a nice big angle, or maybe here. And come on. Oh, sticky tape's making it hard. Alright, there we go, that'll do. And now I'm just going to tap it with the hammer, and it will move a very small amount, and the chain will tighten or loosen a great deal. You only have to move it a matter of millimeters. So you can see at the moment, before I start, the chain is very loose. Now I'm just going to move it, I think that way is tightening, so I'm going to go that way about 4 millimeters. I'm just going to tap it very lightly with the hammer, so I don't damage. Alright, that's about 13 millimeters adjustment. And getting there. And the sticky tape's stopping it from doing any more damage. I reckon that's perfect, it's only just touching the top. So now it's going up from the bottom to the top about 1.5 inches. Now the last step you have to do, and this is a mistake I made when I started changing my chains early on, is if you get a brand new chain and you keep cleaning and greasing it all the time, the tension on each part of the chain remains pretty much fully the same. But if you buy a bike that's been used and the chain, like most people, has nearly never been cleaned, the amount of tension on the chain on one side to the other can be completely different. On one side it can be like, it can move 1/2 inch, and on the other side it could move like 2.5, 3 inches, and you're like, wow, if the chain is that bad, you should probably just change it. This chain has been well looked after, but I can tell already it's already uneven, even though it's been cleaned and greased all the time. So I'm just going to go around the wheel and find out where the tightest part of the chain is. That's the part you're meant to adjust to 1.5 inches, which is what I should have done from the beginning. Okay, so that's only going up and down about 1 inch. A bit more. Yeah, that's looser now. Looser. Yeah, that's about 2 inches. Oh, getting tighter again. Oh, it went past it. So the tightest part's about here. Just see if it varies anymore. So the tightest part of the chain is there. And it goes up and down about nearly just under 1 inch. So it's a little bit too tight. I think I'll just make it the tiniest bit looser. So the chain's okay. It does the job, but it's pretty uneven. If it was any worse than that, I would just take it off completely and change it. Alrighty, so yeah, that's pretty much it. If you understand everything is basic, it only takes you 5 minutes, and if you want to be extremely cautious like I was in the past, and you watch these videos and you watch it 4 times before you make a move because you're worried about damaging your bike, it would still take you half an hour or less. This is very basic, so don't pay someone to service your bike doing this, make sure you do it on your own. So I'm all finished now. The tightest part on the chain is here, and it's going up and down about 1 1/4 inch. The perfect chain tension is about 1.5 inches, and if you had the tightest part of your chain at 1 inch, you'd probably get away with it, but I'd be safer and go a little bit more. So the tightest part of my chain that's uneven is 1.5 inches up and down. Just look at the bottom of it and the top of it, 1.5 inches. Now if I turn it around, you can see the rest of the chain is quite loose and is more than the 1.5 inch. It's about 2 inches, but until you get to 2.5 it's fine. So that's fine. So now last step, very simply, just tighten that back up again. Now you're meant to do it precisely to what is it called, a torque setting, and you have these adjustable wrenches that start clicking. Like you pull real hard and they go click click click, ping ping ping, and they start popping when you've gone tight enough. If you're going to service your bike a couple of times a year at least, I wouldn't bother with that, especially if you keep the bike nice and clean like this. I don't have a torque wrench, so the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten this up by hand and try and remember as carefully as possible how tight it was when I loosened it. If you don't have a torque wrench, here's a helpful tip. Just before you start, get something like a whiteout pen, or like I'm doing now, a permanent texture, and I'll just put a dot there. Try not to make it look too ugly, and I'll put a dot right next to it so that I remember where that nut is meant to line up, so that I know next time I don't tighten it too little or too much. Just one last helpful tip of the day. If your chain is very dirty, don't adjust it and then clean it, because after you've cleaned it, the tension that you've set the chain to could be completely off, because all the particles and messy stuff clumped to your chain that you've removed has now given it kind of like more stretch. So if your chain is dirty, clean the chain and get it nice and clean and sparkling before you start the adjustment. If it's not really dirty, don't worry about it, just adjust it. And yeah, clean your chain every now and again. I clean my chain about every 1,000 kilometers or every month, whatever comes first. So that's it, guys. Sorry for any of my rambling, saying the same thing over and over again. I hope my video was simple and you enjoyed it, and you learn how to self-service your bike yourself and save a lot of money. Bye, guys.